The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning. I thought the hardest part would be seeing 24 years reduced to 12 pages of legal language. I was wrong. 3 hours later, my attorney placed a property report in front of me and quietly asked, "David, have you ever been to 148 Pine Hollow Road?" I looked at the address. No. He slid a photograph across the desk. A white farmhouse sat beneath two enormous oak trees. Fresh paint. A wraparound porch. A flower garden already blooming despite the cool April weather. It looked like the kind of place Rachel always slowed down to admire whenever we drove through the countryside. "I've never seen it," I said. My attorney nodded slowly. "I didn't think you had." Then he turned the document toward me. Owner, Rachel Ann Collins. Only Rachel. Not David and Rachel. Not Collins Family Trust. Just Rachel. I stared at the page until the letters stopped looking like words. She bought this? Almost 6 years ago. My chest tightened. How? He opened another folder. That's the part I wanted you to see. Inside were mortgage statements, property tax receipts, insurance payments, repair invoices. Every payment had come from our joint checking account. Our account. The same account we used to pay our mortgage. The same account where my paycheck had landed every other Friday for nearly 20 years. I looked at the total. Over $300,000. I had helped pay for a house I didn't even know existed. My name is David Collins. I was 58 years old when my marriage officially ended. For 32 years, I worked as a civil engineer in Indianapolis. I spent my career inspecting bridges, reviewing construction plans, and explaining to impatient developers why foundations mattered more than appearances. Funny how life teaches the same lesson twice. Rachel and I had been married 24 years. We weren't the couple who fought loudly. We were the couple everyone described as steady. Sunday breakfasts, family vacations to Michigan every August, movie nights every Friday, Christmas Eve always at my sister Ellen's house. We had 2 children. Nathan was 27, Emily was 24, both grown, both living on their own. Looking back, I realized something. A quiet marriage can hide louder lies than an unhappy one. Rachel worked as an accountant for a regional healthcare company. Numbers were her language. She balanced everything: receipts, budgets, retirement accounts, taxes. For years, I joked that I could lose my wallet, and Rachel would already know exactly how much cash had been inside. She laughed every time. Now I wondered whether she laughed because she knew something I didn't. There was one habit Rachel never changed. Every morning she drank coffee from the same dark green ceramic mug. It had a tiny chip near the handle from when Nathan dropped it in middle school. I bought her that mug during a weekend trip to Asheville almost 15 years earlier. Whenever I made coffee, I filled her mug first. Even after arguments, even after silent dinners. The mug was our routine, a tiny promise that tomorrow would still look familiar. The morning she handed me divorce papers, I filled it anyway. Rachel didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She simply sat across from me at the kitchen table. "I've already rented an apartment," she said quietly. I remember staring at the steam rising from her mug. "You've already decided?" "I decided months ago." Months, not weeks. Months. I asked why. She looked toward the backyard. "I don't think we've been happy for a long time." It sounded practiced, like she'd repeated it enough times that the words no longer belonged to her. I asked if there was someone else. She answered immediately. No. It was the fastest answer she'd given all morning. At the time, I believed her. The divorce itself wasn't what shocked me. Marriages end, People change. I've seen enough life to know that. What destroyed me was discovering that Rachel hadn't been planning to leave. She'd been building somewhere else to go. For years. Mark Jensen had been my attorney for nearly a decade. Mostly business contracts. Nothing dramatic. When Rachel filed for divorce, I hired him because I trusted him. 3 days after receiving the paperwork, he called. "David, I need you to come in." His voice sounded different, careful. When I arrived, he didn't start with legal strategy. He started with a question. "Did you ever approve a second mortgage?" "No." "Did you ever co-sign another property?" "No." "Did Rachel inherit real estate?" "No." He turned his monitor toward me. County property records. Owner, Rachel Ann Collins. Purchase date, 5 years, 9 months earlier. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because my brain refused to organize the information into something possible. There has to be a mistake. There isn't. Mark had hired a forensic accountant. Rachel's salary alone couldn't support another mortgage. But together, our combined income easily could. The payments had been hidden among ordinary monthly expenses: insurance, utility adjustments, investment transfers, tax withholding corrections. Rachel had labeled everything so carefully that no single withdrawal looked suspicious. $2,800, $3,100, $1,800. Small enough to disappear, large enough to buy another life. I drove home in silence. The house suddenly felt unfamiliar. Every room held memories that now asked different questions. The dining room where Rachel celebrated Emily's college graduation. The living room where we watched old movies every Christmas. The kitchen where she'd balanced our checkbook every Sunday afternoon. How many times had she sat there calculating payments for another house while I watched football only a few feet away? That evening, I opened our filing cabinet. Rachel organized everything: insurance, taxes, retirement, medical records, house repairs, every folder perfectly labeled. There was one drawer I had never opened. Archived. Inside were dozens of old statements, most ordinary. Then I found an envelope. No label, just white. Inside was a hardware store receipt. Pine Hollow lumber, garden supplies, paint, kitchen cabinets. Date: almost 4 years ago. The same weekend, Rachel told me she was visiting her mother because she'd fallen down the basement stairs. Her mother had never fallen. I called my sister Ellen. "Did Mom ever tell you Rachel visited that weekend?" Silence. Then Ellen said quietly, "David, your mother was with us that entire weekend." I gripped the phone tighter. "What?" "She never saw Rachel." For the first time since the divorce papers arrived, I stopped believing the hidden house was the biggest secret. Something else had been living inside my marriage, and I had a feeling I wasn't ready to hear it. I didn't tell Nathan or Emily about the house. Not yet. Children, no matter how old they are, have a strange way of trying to protect both parents at the same time. I wasn't ready to force them into choosing sides. Instead, I started asking questions. Quiet questions. Questions with dates. Questions that couldn't be answered with feelings. For 24 years, Rachel had handled almost every household bill. I wasn't careless with money, but I trusted her. Every month I transferred my paycheck into our joint account, and every month everything simply worked. Mortgage, insurance, utilities, retirement, college tuition. It felt responsible. Now it felt convenient. The forensic accountant Mark hired gave me copies of transactions stretching back almost 6 years. The pattern was almost beautiful. If you admired deception, no payment ever exceeded $4,000. Sometimes Rachel transferred money to a consulting account. 3 days later, it went to Pine Hollow Mortgage Services. Sometimes she labeled payments quarterly tax adjustment. The exact amount appeared 48 hours later as a mortgage payment. Every lie had been dressed like ordinary paperwork. That frightened me more than discovering the house itself. This wasn't panic. This wasn't an affair that spiraled out of control. This was planning. Months, then years. Every single transfer had required Rachel to open our banking app, move money, close it again, and sit across from me at dinner like nothing had happened. 3 days later, Mark called again. "I think you should see the property." "I don't want to." "I know." "So why?" "Because photographs don't tell you everything." We drove there on a gray Wednesday afternoon. Pine Hollow Road wasn't hidden. That somehow made it worse. The neighborhood was quiet. Older homes, large yards, children riding bicycles, people mowing grass. Normal. Mark slowed the car as we approached the address. The house looked lived in. Fresh flowers. Wind chimes. A pickup truck in the driveway. Garden gloves hanging from the porch railing. Nothing about it looked abandoned. Nothing looked like an investment property. It looked like someone's home. I stared through the windshield. Rachel had chosen blue shutters. She always wanted blue shutters. When we bought our own house 20 years earlier, she'd begged me to paint ours navy. I wanted dark gray. We compromised. Standing there now, I realized she hadn't compromised at all. She'd simply waited until she had another house. As we turned around, an older woman walked across the street carrying groceries. She smiled politely. "You folks looking for somebody?" Mark answered before I could. "We're trying to find the owner." "Oh." She smiled again. "You mean Rachel?" My stomach tightened. "You know her?" "Of course." "Does she live here?" The woman looked confused. "Most weekends." Every muscle in my body went still. "Weekends?" "Usually Friday evening until Sunday." She adjusted the grocery bag. "Such a sweet couple." "Couple." I looked at Mark. He didn't say a word. The woman kept talking. "They've really fixed the place up." "They?" She nodded. "Rachel and Michael." Michael, the name landed harder than I expected, not because I recognized it, because Rachel had answered too quickly when I asked if there was someone else. No. One word. No hesitation. She had practiced that answer. The woman smiled politely again. "Well, have a nice afternoon." We waited until she disappeared inside her house. Then I whispered, "Who's Michael?" Mark looked down at his notebook. I was hoping she was mistaken. I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I parked beside a small lake about 15 minutes away. For nearly an hour, I watched ducks cross the water. I kept thinking about weekends. Rachel always visited her mother twice a month, or attended accounting conferences, or stayed overnight helping a coworker through chemotherapy. Sometimes she'd leave Friday afternoon carrying an overnight bag. She always kissed me goodbye. "Don't forget to water the tomatoes." "I'll be home Sunday." I remembered those weekends clearly. Nathan sometimes came over to watch football. Emily stopped by with groceries. I cooked pasta. I mowed the lawn. I slept alone in our bed, believing my wife was taking care of someone else. Instead, she'd been planting flowers around another porch. That night, I couldn't stop looking through old photographs. Our 20th anniversary. Rachel smiling beside me. The following weekend, she'd supposedly attended a financial seminar in Louisville. According to the neighbor, she'd probably spent it at Pine Hollow Road. Christmas 3 years earlier. She left the day after because her mother had caught the flu. Now I wondered if she'd simply wanted another Christmas with another man. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Emily. Dad? Hey. You sound tired. I am. She hesitated. Mom came by yesterday. I sat up straighter. She did? Yeah. Why? Emily became quiet. I don't know. Emily. She asked if I'd still come to dinner Sunday. Dinner? At some house outside Bloomington. My heart skipped. What house? She said she'd explain later. I closed my eyes. Rachel hadn't just built another life. She was slowly inviting our children into it, without telling me. I asked Emily one question. Had you ever heard of Pine Hollow Road before? Silence. Too much silence. Finally, she whispered, I thought it was a rental. The room suddenly felt smaller. You knew? I didn't know everything. What did you know? About 2 years ago, Mom asked me to help her move some furniture. I couldn't breathe. Emily, I thought she bought it as an investment. Did you meet anyone there? Another pause. Then, there was a man. I gripped the phone so tightly my hand hurt. What did Mom tell you? Emily's voice cracked. She said he was a contractor helping renovate the house. I looked out the kitchen window. Rachel hadn't only hidden another home, she had quietly involved our daughter. Not with the truth, with just enough of a lie to make sure no questions reached me. And suddenly, I wasn't wondering how many weekends she'd spent away. I was wondering how many people had unknowingly helped her keep my marriage alive, while she was already living somewhere else. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of Michael, because of Emily. I kept replaying her words. I thought it was an investment. She had believed her mother, just like I had. The difference was that Rachel only gave Emily one small piece of the lie. She gave me all of it. Monday morning, Mark called. I found Michael. I closed my office door before answering. Who is he? Michael Turner, 59, former custom home builder. Married? Divorced. When? 8 years ago. I stared at the bridge plans spread across my desk. 8 years. Rachel bought the Pine Hollow house 6 years ago. So, they met after his divorce. Are you sure? No. Mark paused. But I'm sure they've known each other much longer. That sentence stayed with me all day. Much longer. When I came home that evening, I opened the old cedar chest Rachel and I had filled over the years with photographs, birthday cards, and souvenirs from family vacations. I wasn't looking for Michael. I didn't even know what he looked like. I was looking for years, dates, patterns. I found an old photo album from a charity fundraiser almost 7 years earlier. Rachel had organized the event through work. There were pictures of volunteers setting up tables, people hanging lights, a silent auction. Then, there he was, a tall man with gray hair carrying folding chairs, standing beside Rachel, both of them smiling, not touching, just comfortable. The kind of comfort people don't usually build in a single afternoon. I turned the page. Another picture. Rachel laughing at something he had said. Then another. They were always somewhere near each other. Never obvious. Never inappropriate. Just close enough that nobody would think twice. Except now. I was thinking about every single photograph. The following afternoon, Mark asked me to meet him. He had printed several public records. Utility bills, building permits, insurance documents. The Pine Hollow house had undergone major renovations over 5 years. New kitchen, new roof, finished basement, landscaping. Almost every contractor invoice had been paid within days. Cash, or transfers from Rachel's separate account. Then Mark slid over another folder. This came from the accountant. Inside were retirement withdrawals, small ones, not enough to trigger suspicion. 5,000, 7,000, 3,000, spread across years. Rachel hadn't only used our checking account. She had quietly emptied part of our future, too. I leaned back in my chair. I don't understand. Mark stayed quiet. If she wanted another life... I stopped talking, because suddenly I realized something. Rachel hadn't waited until the divorce. She'd already been living it. Every Friday, every holiday she spent helping her mother, every conference, every overnight seminar. She wasn't escaping occasionally. She was going home. 2 days later, Nathan called. "Dad." His voice sounded different. "You okay?" "No. I need to tell you something." I felt my stomach tighten. "What is it?" "I think Mom lied to me too." I closed my eyes. "What happened?" Nathan sighed. "Remember when my truck broke down 3 years ago?" "Yeah. Mom loaned me $5,000. I remember. I tried paying her back. And? She refused. I didn't understand why that mattered. Then Nathan continued. She told me to send the money somewhere else. Where? I never looked." He paused. "I found the old transfer receipt yesterday." My hands became cold. The account belonged to Michael Turner. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Nathan finally whispered, "Dad, I think I helped pay for him." That sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because of the money, because Rachel had unknowingly made our son part of the deception too. Nathan had believed he was repaying his mother. Instead, he had sent money directly to another man. 3 days later came the discovery none of us were prepared for. Mark called just after lunch. "I need you here." His voice was flat, not excited, not shocked, just careful. That frightened me. When I arrived, he closed the office door. "I've been trying to understand why Rachel hid the house so carefully. I thought we already knew. I don't think we did." He placed an old property deed in front of me. Purchase date, 23 years earlier, long before Rachel and I married. Owner, Michael Turner. I frowned. What am I looking at? Mark slid over another document, a refinancing agreement, 6 years ago. Michael had almost lost the property, missed mortgage payments, tax liens, outstanding debt. The bank was preparing foreclosure. Then, Rachel bought the house. Not from a stranger, from Michael. She paid off every debt, transferred ownership solely into her own name, allowed him to continue living there, rent-free, for 6 years. I stared at the paperwork. She hadn't bought an investment. She had rescued someone. I looked at Mark. "Why?" He hesitated. "I finally spoke with Michael's ex-wife. And? She remembered Rachel." I felt my heartbeat quicken. "How?" "They weren't strangers." Mark looked directly at me. "They were engaged." The room disappeared. "What?" "Before you ever met Rachel." I couldn't speak. Mark continued quietly. "They were together almost 4 years. They planned to marry. They broke up only 6 months before you started dating her." I looked back down at the documents. Rachel hadn't found an old boyfriend. She had gone back. To the man she never stopped loving. Everything suddenly made horrible sense. The blue shutters, the wraparound porch, the garden, the weekends. She wasn't building something new. She had spent 6 years rebuilding the life she believed she should have had instead of ours. And I realized the divorce hadn't begun when Rachel filed the paperwork. It had begun the day she bought that house. I just hadn't been invited to the funeral of my marriage. For a long time after Mark told me Rachel and Michael had once been engaged, I couldn't say anything. I simply stared at the property records lying on his desk. 24 years. That was how long I believed I understood the story of my own marriage. Now I realized I had only known the version Rachel wanted me to live inside. Mark closed the folder. I wish this was the end of it. I looked up. What do you mean? He hesitated. The forensic accountant found something else. I almost laughed. By then, I didn't think there was anything left capable of surprising me. I was wrong. He placed one final report in front of me. Several transfers from Rachel's retirement account had never reached the Pine Hollow mortgage. Instead, they went into a small investment account opened 7 years earlier. The beneficiary wasn't Michael. It wasn't Rachel. It was a trust. The Turner Family Living Trust. I frowned. What's that? Mark answered quietly. Michael's grandchildren. I looked at him. What? The money Rachel invested wasn't only helping Michael. He slid another document across the desk. She was helping build an inheritance for his family. I felt every bit of strength leave my body. For 6 years, Rachel hadn't only been paying another man's mortgage. She had been helping secure the future of children she had never even told me existed. Meanwhile, we postponed vacations. We delayed replacing the leaking roof. Emily paid part of her own graduate school tuition because Rachel insisted retirement had to come first. Nathan borrowed money from the bank to expand his landscaping business because we supposedly couldn't afford to help. Rachel had looked our children in the eyes and quietly chosen someone else's future. When I finally confronted her, it happened in the kitchen. The same kitchen where we'd celebrated birthdays, wrapped Christmas presents, planned college visits. The same kitchen where I had poured coffee into her green mug every morning for almost 2 decades. She stood at the counter while I placed the documents in front of her. She didn't even pretend anymore. She looked at the trust papers, then she sat down. I wasn't going to tell you like this. I pulled out the chair across from her. There was never going to be a right way. For the first time since filing for divorce, Rachel cried. Real tears. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet exhaustion. I never stopped wondering what my life would have been. I looked at her. And ours? She closed her eyes. I loved our family. Our family? My voice stayed calm. You spent 6 years paying another man's bills. I know. You told our children we couldn't afford things. I know. You asked Nathan to send money directly to Michael. She covered her face. I know. I waited. Eventually, she whispered, I thought I could keep both lives. There it was. Not love, not confusion, not a mistake. She wanted both. The dependable husband, the stable home, the respected family, and the life she'd imagined before she married me. I never planned to hurt anyone. I nodded slowly. I believe you. She looked surprised. I also believe you hurt everyone anyway. The room fell silent. Outside, rain tapped softly against the kitchen window. For years, I thought silence meant peace. Now I understood. Sometimes silence is simply where lies grow. The divorce hearing took almost 9 months. There were no dramatic courtroom speeches, no shouting, no public humiliation, just accountants, attorneys, property valuations, bank records. The forensic report became impossible to ignore. More than 70% of Pine Hollow Road had been paid using marital assets. The judge ruled the house was marital property despite Rachel holding sole title. She was given two choices: buy out my share or sell it. Rachel couldn't afford either mortgage on her own anymore. Michael couldn't help. 3 months later, the house sold. I never drove past it again. I didn't need to. Some places stop being buildings. They become reminders. Emily came to see me a few weeks after everything became final. She looked older somehow, not because of time, because betrayal ages entire families. I'm sorry, Dad. You don't have anything to apologize for. I should have asked more questions. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Your mother made sure none of us knew enough to ask. She cried quietly. I thought I was helping paint a rental house. I know. Nathan forgave his mother much more slowly. He spoke to her only through short phone calls during the first year. Not because he hated her. Because every conversation reminded him that the money he'd believed was helping family had been helping someone else's. Almost 2 years later, I bought a small cottage outside Brown County. Nothing extravagant. 1 bedroom, a workshop, a porch overlooking a quiet pond. The first morning there, I unpacked the last kitchen box. Inside was Rachel's old green coffee mug, the chipped one. I must have packed it without noticing. I held it for a long time. 24 years, thousands of mornings. One ordinary object that had survived a marriage built on routines I believed meant love. Then I carried it outside. Not angrily, not dramatically. There was an old donation box outside a local thrift store a few miles away. I placed the mug inside. Someone else might drink from it someday. Someone with no memories attached to it. As I drove away, I realized I didn't need to break it. Some things don't need to be destroyed. They simply need to stop following you. That evening, I sat on my porch with a plain white mug I'd bought from a hardware store for $6. The pond was perfectly still. A pair of ducks crossed the water without making a sound. My phone buzzed once. A message from Rachel. I hope one day you'll remember the good years. I looked at the screen for a long moment. Then I locked my phone without replying. Because the good years had been real. The birthdays, the vacations, the laughter, none of that had been fake. But neither had the choices she made afterward. Healing wasn't pretending one erased the other. It was learning they could exist at the same time, without letting either one define the rest of my life. I picked up my coffee. It was already getting cold. For the first time in years, there wasn't another mug waiting beside it. And somehow, that felt honest.